I know why you're here, because you are just like me. A slave to Pokemon that barely qualify as anything more than a sphere with cute eyes. Today, I'll be sculpting SMOLIV and Lechonk to satisfy the horribly intrusive thoughts I've had about these two stupid Pokemon ever since the second trailer came out. For the base, I'm gonna finally use this piece of wood that I've had for way too long, but before I add anything to it, I have to start with the Pokemon, that way I know I'm working on the right scale when I make everything else. Lechonk is up first, and I'm gonna make a nice round sphere of aluminum that I can cover in clay. SMOLIV follows the same process, only I shape it slightly more like an egg with a flat top and bottom. Once I throw those in the oven, it's time to start working on an armature for the berry tree they'll be sitting under. I'm gonna use the berry trees in Sword and Shield as my reference, cause although they look pretty bad by video game standards, I can make it more clean cut and cartoony as a sculpture. After I added some branches and bulked at the top with aluminum, SMOLIV and Lechonk were fresh out of the oven, ready to be turned into creatures as smooth as a bald Bellossom. I sanded in between every single step while constructing their bodies, but you only need to see it once, and I need to repress these memories as quickly as possible because I hate having to sand things. Regardless, it does look really smooth now, so we can start adding on Lechonk's body parts by pre-shaping his onigiri nose. And this was all I thought about when shaping his nose.
You look kind of down, Ash. Huh? Have a donut. That always cheers me up. Have a donut. That always cheers me up.
These donuts are great. Jelly-filled are my favorite. Nothing beats a jelly-filled donut.
Sorry, I just had to air that childhood grievance of mine. Also let me know in the comments who you were a complete simp for in the Pokemon anime. For me, I think it was Jesse James, Brock, and Professor Ivy from the Orange Islands arc. Anyway, moving on from being a simp, as hard as that may be, we're gonna attach his chonky legs, smooth them out, and admire his dump truck for a second before attaching and shaping his nose. Pose I'm going for, I want it to look like he's completely gorged himself on berries, so he needs to have an open mouth, and luckily for me, the trailer provided me with the perfect pose reference for Lechonk, but sadly not for SMOLIV. This SMOLIV is looking more like a sm because we haven't given him the olive yet, so let's do that. I added a slightly elongated ball of clay on top of his head, and I pressed down the olive vent thing with one of my tools. And look at that, the perfect clay hors d'oeuvre. Just wanna eat it up. Anyway, now that we have that on there, we can add the thick leaves that rest right under his olive. These are just rolls of clay that are skinny on top, thick on the bottom, that I attach using Bacon Bond. Once they're all on, I blend them together, and then I can add the mini leaf that sits smack dab in the center of his forehead. With his olive wig completely snatched, we can add the tiny little stumps that Game Freak tries to pass off as legs. And luckily for me, it wasn't really hard to make it look like he was sitting down because they're just so simple in design. Woohoo, he can walk now. Most of the parts of our Pokemon are on, Lechonk just needs some eyes and a tail. For his eyes, I pressed down a ball of clay and sculpted away the excess until it was the proper shape, after which I added his bottom eyelid and shaped that accordingly. Once his eyes were all done, I had to do something unspeakable to him for the greater good. I pressed in a pre-baked tail to the hole I drilled and baked it once more to save my progress. After adding his pupils, I can add his ears, and I just used thin triangles and shaped them until they were sufficiently droopy. And now we are officially done with Lechonk, and we can finally give SMOLIV a face. I struggled with his mouth a lot. As you can see, it looks like he belongs on a season of Real Housewives with those kissers, so I had to redo the mouth a few times until it looked right, which did take a little bit, but after a quick sand, it actually looked quite good. The eyes were far less challenging. All I had to do was roll up some clay, pat it down to form a circle, and then do the same thing on top, just with a smaller ball of clay. Alright, give yourself a round of applause because we've officially finished the Pokemon. However, I had an idea, and that was to put a pile of berries in between them. Originally, I just wanted a few berries around them, but I think it might drive home the point that they're complete chonkers just a little bit more. Anyway, moving on from that, it's time to construct the tree, so I'm giving it a rough trunk shape, adding the branches, and then smoothing it out so I know exactly where I want the definition to go. Once I had drawn all the lines for the tree, I blended everything in. This is stupid, but you need to listen to it. My tree.
Jiggle, jiggle, it folds. I like to see you wiggle, wiggle.
Okay, thank you, and I'm sorry. I placed a thin layer of clay over the aluminum foil at the top of the tree, so that way I could adhere all these individual leaves to it. The bottom half of the tree has bigger leaves, and the top half of the tree has smaller leaves. I'm gonna stuff the tree in the oven like a Christmas ham and start on the berries. I came to the conclusion that in order to have a good diversity of berries without having to dedicate the rest of my life slaving away trying to recreate all of them, a choice of 6 of my favorites would do the job just fine. For each berry type, the first thing I'm gonna do is make their base body shape. Because every berry has different attributes, colors, and decorations, I can't do every single step for every single berry all at once, otherwise the details would get smushed. Doing each berry one step at a time and baking in between every single addition I made may have taken a while, but it preserved the details perfectly. I baked all of the base shapes, so let's go through them one by one, starting with the orange berry. To make the orange berry's short stem, I add a dollop of bacon bond and stick overlapping dots on top of the berry. Basically the same thing I did to make SMOLIV's eyes. And it definitely looks like, you know what, don't blame me, blame Game Freak, okay? That's what I always do. Okay, anyway, moving on to the nanab berry, I just added the branch on top that connects the bundle of bananas. Next up is the pineapple berry, and I cut out this long strip of triangles to act as the leaves of the pineapple, but sadly it was too thick. Relatable, so I ended up cutting pieces from a thin roll, squeezing them together at the bottom, and that seemed to work out much better. Then we have the Pekka berry, a certified classic, which required me to cut out a long oval for the top leaves. I made an indent in the center, and then I added a short stem. The Leppa berry was tempting not to eat because they're literally forbidden Tic Tacs, but to make them look more like the berry itself, I added 2 big leaves at the top with an indent in the middle of each leaf. Ah, do you smell that beautiful aroma? It's my favorite berry of all the ones I chose, the hondu. I'm not sure if it's a personality flaw or a coincidence, but I sure do like complicated things because this berry took me the longest out of all of them. For the stem, I had to do an MS Paint Tesla logo, and for every single berry, it required me to glue on 12 tiny dots of clay. But with that, we can officially put away our clay and start painting our Pokemon. I'm gonna start with SMOLIV's Olive and give that a few coats. You'll notice I'm still an honorary member of the cheap paint gang, so it took me about 5 coats of paint for each section. Because I went through the effort of sanding it nice and smooth, I didn't want my paint application to be bumpy, so I applied it very thinly to ensure I didn't ruin the texture. I gave his eyes a coat of black and then white, and I gave the inside of his mouth a dark pink, and boom, SMOLIV is done, onto Lechonk. Our chunky boy gets a base of dark gray, which was extremely satisfying to paint on, and after 2 coats of that, we can add the brown markings on his face and ears. I paint his bottom eyelids yellow, give his snout a base of pink, and give the inside of his nostrils and his pupils a coat of black. Both Pokemon are officially done, and now we can quickly go over how each berry type gets painted. For each Pekka berry, I gave it a base coat of darker pink before giving the tip of each fruit a highlight of lighter pink. Each and every berry got a random assortment of lighter pink dots and a nice set of green leaves. Next up is the Pinap berry, and wouldn't you know it, we're painting it to look like a pineapple. The body gets a base coat of yellow, and we'll be using a much darker yellowy brown to add 3 zigzag lines on it. The leaves get a coat of green, and oh my goodness, these are so cute. Moving on to the Leppa berry, I think this one was the most satisfying to paint. Something about the red color I used made it look like a pristine jewel. I'll be painting on the bottom design with an orange, which took a few coats, and a yellow before giving the leaves a coat of green. The Nanab berry was the easiest. Everything got an even coat of yellow, and I painted about 3/4 of the way up of all the bananas with pink. The orange berries are next, and we can finally turn them from a bird into a berry. All of them get a base coat of this gorgeous blue, and once that dries, a random assortment of dark blue dots and 2 shades of green for the stems. Last up is the Hondu, and thankfully it wasn't as difficult to paint as it was to sculpt. The body gets this weirdly appetizing shade of mint green, and all of the dots get a bright yellow. After that was done, it was time to go conduct an interview.
Sir, may I get your opinion on Pokemon Scarlet and Pokemon Violet? Sir, please, don't run away.
Well, that wasn't as productive as I thought it would be, so maybe you could tell me your thoughts about Scarlet and Violet while I paint this tree. I have pretty controversial Pokemon opinions, so I don't want to get cancelled, but I do enjoy hearing what the community thinks. All the memes about the hot professors, and especially Lechonk and Smolive, that's literally why I'm making this video, it honestly kind of made me want to buy this one despite not having purchased a Pokemon game in years. Alright, for the next part, we're gonna need to go outside and get some dirt. Thank you, Ace. You've been a huge help. I put the dirt in the oven to sterilize it, and while it was cooking, I glued on some berries to the berry tree, and oh my goodness, it is so cute. Alright, it's finally time to work on the base, so I'm gonna take the tree off for a moment and plug the holes with some toothpicks. For the first layer of the base, we're going to create a wonderful and nutritious concoction of dirt and glue. Using a wooden stir stick, I'm going to mix it all up until it has a consistency that's very hard to resist playing with, and quickly slather on a thin coat of Mod Podge to the base. I considered keeping the beveled edge of the wood and just painting it brown, but I figured it would look better if the sculpture looked like it just popped up out of the ground. While the dirt is still wet, I'm going to indent a place for all of our big pieces. This is the piece that's going to provide the shape for the berry pile. It's just a bunch of clay balls smushed together, and you won't really see much of it. Once the top layer of dirt had dried, I added one more thin coat of Mod Podge for the static grass, and then I glued down our Pokemon in their respective positions. The last thing to do was to add all of the berries we painstakingly crafted to the pile and to the surrounding area. My friends, I present to you the wonderful sculpture whose origin lies in memes. I gotta give you a huge thank you for watching all the way to the end. I'm so happy with how this one turned out. It feels a lot more polished than my other crafts, so let me know what you think. If you have any crafting recommendations, leave them down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.